Just take a look at the list. So we'll start out. So spinal cord, you notice this is the brain, and then you have the spinal cord coming down, and we said it tapers off right here to this point. The cervical enlargement, well, we got to look in this area here just where it's a little thicker, right there. E1 is good labeling for cervical enlargement. And then coming down, you could call it simply lumbar enlargement or lumbosacral enlargement. Lumbar enlargement, lumbosacral enlargement, and then it tapers off to a point. That's the conus medullaris we've been mentioning. So that's the end of the adult spinal cord. And you notice the ribs here. So thoracic vertebrae in this region, getting past that last floating rib right up there by L1, L2, conus medullaris location for an adult. The spinal nerves or roots and ganglia, that's not on this model. So we got to skip to cauda equina, the horsetail. Well, you can see that shown right here. So the big bundle of nerves that are hanging down, that cauda equina. Nerve right here, this represents the brachial plexus, the whole group of clustered nerves that ultimately extend down your brachium, down your arm. So right here, a brachial plexus. Yeah, all of this region right here, brachial plexus. You notice for the thoracic region, it's just individual nerves. They never interconnect. So we have a brachial plexus. We got to skip all of this area. And then we have the area down here where we're getting to the lumbar plexus. You notice branching from this portion. Or further into here, the sacral plexus.
So all of these right here are
lumbar plexus, sacral plexus. And you notice you could follow this lumbar plexus back up towards the lumbar portion of the spinal cord, that little short segment. Okay? So brachial plexus, lumbar plexus, sacral plexus. From the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic chain ganglia, that's where you see this little pink cell body. Sympathetic chain ganglia. They would be on both sides. Yeah, sympathetic chain ganglia.
Central canal.
So you're looking at the pink. Yeah, and they're all chained together by this yellow section. Well, the sympathetic chain. So the sympathetic chain you could point to in yellow, and they're connecting the sympathetic chain ganglia together.
Wait, can you say that one more time? The sympathetic chain is the pink.
The chain is the yellow.
The ganglia is the pink.
Ganglia is the pink. So ganglia, there are a whole bunch of cell bodies, right? And then the chain is now allowing for communication between. We already said it's just being repeated for some reason. Cervical enlargement, lumbosacral enlargement. As it tapers off to a point, conus medullaris. So that's just repeating the same thing. Oh, that cat nervous system model, we don't even have that here. It's the same thing, so you can cross it off. Some type of preservative. I think it's like the other cats you see up there. You just don't have that nervous system one. So all those terms you already saw up here. So for this model, I believe that's about it.
Nope, that's from the legs.
And that goes on.
So where's the epidural?
So, well, epidural, they would come from the back.
Yeah.
This is like looking at the anterior view.
They would come here? Here?
First they find the lowest
Yeah,
rib,
they come from the posterior side.
and then go into the lumbar and count the vertebrae.
And they kind of go up at an angle when they do it. We'll insert it.
Thank you very much.
And then, you know this, right?
Oh, the psoas major, iliacus,
Quadratic.
We talked about this in lecture. Right at the point of the conus medullaris, what's the ligament structure? Right in the middle?
The FT.
FT, filum terminale.
What you said?
Filum terminale. But for lab, we're looking at all these nerves, the cauda equina.
This here, why?
All right, do something else.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what does it say on the list?
That was great.
Posterior median sulcus, so posterior in the middle. A sulcus is a really tight groove. posterior median sulcus.
So it's not this outer part?
I mean, it starts here, but then it goes all the way in. So a sulcus is like, if I could draw it,
I'm sorry.
you got a bulge, and then it's like a really, really tight space between it.
It's butt crack.
It's a sulcus. There you go. And on the anterior side, you see how it's wider? Anterior median fissure, because a fissure is wider.
Right.
Sulcus is really tight. Okay? Posterior gray horn. Well, the spinous process is posterior, right? Posterior gray horn, lateral gray horn, the ventral gray horn. And I'll take anterior ventral, I'll take posterior dorsal. Say it either way.
So posterior, lateral, and anterior.
Gray horn. And the white matter columns, it's just posterior white column, lateral white column, and of course anterior white column, lateral white column, and posterior white column again. Okay.
And this is just a statement, anterior versus posterior gray commissures.
Okay, so the gray commissure is all of this section in the middle, gray matter. And you want to look for that little hole right there. And are you anterior or are you
That's the central
posterior?
canal of that little hole.
That little hole is the central canal. So just front and back, different sides of the gray commissure.
Alright.
We already said white matter, anterior, lateral, posterior, white columns.
Next is dorsal root.
Dorsal root. So the roots are now connected to the spinal cord, these wires. So dorsal's got to be posterior, dorsal root, ventral roots. Yeah, ventral roots, dorsal roots.
And what are these exactly? Are they...
They're just big bundles of axons.
Okay.
Yeah, bundles of axons.
Dorsal root.
And now you notice the dorsal root, it leads out and connects to this big cluster here. That's a dorsal root ganglia. The dorsal root ganglion, all the cluster, cell bodies. Outside of the spinal cord, right? So they're ganglia. They're in the peripheral nervous system. It's shown over here as the bulge, but you notice it's still wrapped. Here it is, isolated. Dorsal root ganglion.
Ventral root.
Ventral root, well, that's this side here. Anterior side is ventral root.
Oh, we already did that.
The dorsal root leads to the dorsal root ganglion.
Can we call it the posterior root or no?
I'll take it.
Posterior and anterior root.
I'll accept that.
Spinal
The
nerve.
ventral root is that one, right? Okay.
Both those, right? Yeah.
Alright, so where does that put us at? Spinal nerve?
Yep.
Now she has the description there. You got your two different roots, right? Front and back. And just as they come close together, that's where they form the spinal nerve. And it should have that same description there. Formed when dorsal ventral roots merge. So it's
It's kind of like the tip of the dorsal
So
root.
it's not this and this, it's just right here.
Because it splits.
Oh, just right here? Not this whole thing?
They're really short. Spinal nerves are really short. And then you can see it already splits. So these are two other terms we'll cover.
So right in front of the dorsal root ganglia.
In fact, let's skip down. Let's just point out 20 and 21 right now. That's where you see rami. Dorsal ramus, ventral ramus. So, what's dorsal, what's ventral?
This is dorsal.
Yeah, so dorsal ramus, ventral ramus. So you got your spinal nerve just right here. You got your two roots. The roots come close together to make a spinal nerve. And then the spinal nerve splits to make your ventral ramus. You notice it's bigger and it's anterior. Posterior, smaller, dorsal ramus.
Why the smaller and bigger?
This covers a larger area of your body. So ultimately there's so many more nerves branching to the large proportion of your body. This only signals to the back of your torso. And she has that description there. So they're not, the rami are not the same as the roots. And then blah, 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 blah. So let's do this portion we skipped. You notice meninges? So you have the spinal cord here, but there's all these layers wrapped around it. So the epidural space, that's this yellow adipose tissue. So So the fat cushion.
Yeah, well, the pink is the
So is the meninge like this whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
So right now we're outside of the meninges. We're just at the epidural space, the fat. And then the first layer right in, I'm touching here. But it does wrap all the way around. That is the duramater, right where I'm touching.
So it's the first layer in front of the adipose.
Now think about the name. You got duramater, and then around that you got epidural space. Okay. Epidural space, directly deep to that, the duramater. And then just going in order, the next layer I got to put it like right on the inside of that yellow line. So right here now where I'm touching, and it goes around. Just inside of that yellow line on the model.
And what was the yellow line? Is that just
The yellow line's nothing. It's just separating the dura to the arachnoid mater. So in your body, those two layers are touching, dura and arachnoid.
Oh, okay.
Is that like from Spider?
That's the appearance of the next portion. You see the term subarachnoid space? On the model, it just looks like this gap. But in that gap, there's little branching collagen and elastic fibers, and it looks like a spider web. So subarachnoid space, directly deep to the arachnoid mater. And then touching right against the white matter of the spinal cord, this line here, and of course down the side, that is the pia mater. Right on the spinal cord. Right on the white matter. So you got pia, subarachnoid space, arachnoid mater, duramater, epidural space. And we mentioned this in lecture, but you see how the pia mater sticks out on the sides right there? Right there and right there? That's when we use that term in lecture, the denticulate ligaments. They're just represented there. It's not part of the lab though. Okay, cervical vertebra. Well, you notice right there, this is C5. And the transverse foramina are, well, it's filled in. But remember, cervical vertebrae have 3 holes. And here, filling that space, these are the vertebral arteries. So you got these arteries right inside of your cervical vertebrae.
I'm sorry, what page are we on?
5.
Oh, okay.
And they ultimately go to your brain. So vertebral arteries inside of the space of the transverse foramen. We might just bring that model out again, that big cervical vertebra that's above the body. I'll bring that down.
Muscular man.
The bifid spinous process, well, it splits a tray to many cervical vertebrae. And then this goes on to a different model.
So that's all for this model?
Thank you.
What does matter mean? I see that word come up a lot when it comes to this type of
Substance.
like the nervous system. But does that mean, does matter mean anything?
I
Matter?
mean, yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, because I say matter with 2 T's, you know,
Yeah,
matters. What? Something takes up space, has mass. I guess it just means tissue, yeah. Tissue layer.
So why do you hate Apple products? Because we all have our Apple products.
Oh,
They're for political reasons?
no, I mean, no.
I didn't know if they
I'm
did
just
something.